Hello, Book 2. This is Mike Frost, the postmodern poetry prognosticator, here to talk to you today about Acts of Crucifixion by Kechi Nomu. This is the first of a chapbook series from this set of chapbooks, the New Generation African Poets chapbook, a box set. This is the 2018 version of this. I have also the 2019, which I'll get to. But this is a series. I'm going to go through each one of these chapbooks, and I'm just taking them in the order that they come in the box. No particular order. Well, the order that whatever they came in the box is the order I'm going to read them and kind of review each one of these chapbooks as part of a series or a read-a-thon that I'm doing with Rashmika from Rashmika Likes Books called August in Africa. So together we're going to kind of read a lot of the African writers, or as many African writers as we can. I'm reading these chapbooks. I'm also reading a bunch of novels and some poetry collections. I'll do those wrap-ups on Fridays, but as many times as I can read one of these chapbooks, I'm going to do a quick review on them. Not an extensive one, hoping to just expose you to what's in the chapbook box set. And if you're interested in those sort of things, you can pick them up. I got these off Amazon. Well, actually, this one my sister was very kind enough to buy for me off Amazon and sent it to me. So Acts of Crucifixion, Kechi Nomu. We'll start there. And this is the way we'll start our August in Africa. I'm just going to read the back cover. This is Kechi Nomu there. Kechi Nomu was born in 1987. Her poems have appeared in Saraba magazine, Visual Verse, the ANA Poetry Review, Expound magazine, and elsewhere. She is a Farafini Creative Writing Workshop alum. In 2014, she took part in the FemWrite AWDF Regional Nonfiction Writing Workshop in Entebbe, Uganda, and the Kane Prize Short Story Surgery in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. Her fiction and nonfiction have appeared online and in print. In 2017, she was shortlisted for the Brunel International African Poetry Prize. Kechi serves as editor for the Nigerian-based poetry press Konya Shems Rumi and lives in Lagos, Nigeria. Konya Shems Rumi caught my attention, unrelated to my African August in Africa. Konya is a city in Turkey, modern-day Turkey, and Shems Rumi. Rumi here refers to Jalaluddin Rumi, the Mevlana just being a title meaning the wise one or the Sufi master. Shems Jalaluddin, the Whirling Dervishes, people know him by from the Whirling Dervishes. Jalaluddin lived most of his life and taught most of the stuff that is revolving around the wrote poetry for the Whirling Dervishes in Konya, what is modern-day Turkey. At that time, it was a Seljuk Empire, and it was encroaching upon the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire. Rumi just being the Turkish equivalent of from Rome, the Eastern Roman Empire. So they called that area, the Seljuks called that area Rome, or Rum. So Rumi just means from Rome, from the Eastern Roman Empire. Konya being the city that they were in, and Shems being Jalaluddin's teacher. So Shems Rumi is Shems from Rome. It's the teacher of Jalaluddin, whom we in the West know mostly as the Mevlana or Mevlana Rumi, the poet, the Whirling Dervishes, that sort of thing. So I have extensive connections with Turkey. I'm definitely going to have to check out that magazine. But let's stick with August in Africa for now, and I'll follow that up later. So I thought we'd start with a poem. Why not start with just a poem here? And then we'll talk about the introduction, just so get a taste of what the other folks are looking at, or an introduction to the poetry. So I just thought we would take the first poem. Notes to the Boy Kicking the Stone is the title. The boy's body bends to pick the stone, and you see how his body, too, is a road with curves, too many curves. Once or twice you see the bones of his vertebrae become hills. Here a story begins, rises, falls, and ends. and ghosts. So I enjoyed that poem. All right, so I'm a poetry reader. I'm a poetry lover. There's certain things that will catch my attention. It may not or won't come across in the reading, but when you read the poem, I'll show it to you there. And it says that you can see the bones of his back become the vertebrae, become the hills. And if you turn it, if you look at that as a backbone, and you see the hills. Little things like that about poetry they just get my attention. The little things. It's the little things in life that you have to enjoy. So I enjoyed the poem. I look at it. Of course, the last stanza starts with "Here a story begins." So that's a great way to start a series or a chapbook of poems. A couple of other things that kind of caught my attention is the second stanza. You see how his body too is a road, and of course, a road is something traveled, something you go down. So the idea of going down the road of this person's life is a story. And then it says with curves, too many curves. And then the image that I get is for a young boy who's just kicking a rock down the street. There may be too many stories for such a young life. Maybe too many incidents, too much for such a young life. It's a kind of an image that kind of works into my head when I hear something like that. And then, of course, the vertebrae, which would indicate that a thin boy, at least. That doesn't mean anything else other than that, but it's something that I would lock onto in my head and just see where this takes us. If this is where the story begins, where is it going to take us? So that's the first poem in the book. Now, I don't normally read introductions, but I think that this is in this case, I will read a little bit of the introduction because I can't possibly cover all aspects of this thing. So, and this would be another person's view of some of these poems or the way they read the poems. So you can get, by reading a little bit of the introduction, you can get another person's view besides my own. So I'll just read a couple of little snippets from the introduction and hopefully that will whet your appetite for more. So it begins with a preface. In Acts of Crucifixion, Nigerian poet Kechi Nomu's poems feel simultaneously futuristic, immediate, and ancient. What is initially striking about this work is the feeling of synchronicity, the interconnectivity that the poet skillfully constructs with her fluid handling of time and character. Especially striking is a moment where the semi or fully autobiographical I is the sole concern of many poems in the collection and in collections of poems. Are all the people in Nomu's poems populated with lovers, fathers, mothers, boys, elves, and ghosts, speaking and spoken about in a cacophony to give this work a feeling of congregation. As a result, remarkably, these poems, though not without their aches, do not succumb to the primary risk of deep self-reflection, loneliness. Their characters are given exquisite attention in the hands of the speaker, who writes with equal care about we, they, she, he, you, and the occasional, beautifully timed clarity of the I. So I read a lot of poetry and I read a lot of introductions, and why I don't read a whole lot more introductions is they end up being air. And some of that is a little bit of fluff. But I get the sense of what she's trying to put across is that this is not going to be like confessional poetry. It's not all going to be about I feel this, I feel that. And that first poem would be an example of that. She's writing a poem about the boy kicking the rock. So it's not going to be all self-centered and self-absorbed kind of poetry I get from that bit of the first paragraph. Second paragraph, first line from the second paragraph, first line from the third paragraph. So it just, Nomi builds in this chapbook a Mobius strip of a world that begins over and over, where events of the past continue to happen, where forgetting is impossible. I'll skip down to another line here. In Three Women, a poem, the speaker's maternal grandmother dies every day in her lover's arms, rising again each day to die once more in an endless loop. So I've kind of pulled those out of the context, but in context, and maybe if I read the whole thing, but I haven't got time for that. I get a sense that here we're dealing with a non-Western view of time and ancestors, if you will. In a Western culture such as my own, there's a very linear idea of time. Time has a past, a present, and a future. In non-Western cultures, we talked a little bit about Rumi and Turkey. In non-Western cultures, that idea of a complete separation between what it has been, is, and what will be is not so clear-cut, not so delineated in Eastern or non-Western cultures. And I get a sense of what the preface is trying to refer us to is there's not a sense of that Western linear idea of time. And of course, ancestors, we have a different idea of ancestors. We tend, generalizing now, tend in the West to put a mantle up, a picture up of an ancestor and really don't have any interaction with them, which is not the same in non-Western cultures. So I get a sense, I know I pulled those two lines out of context, but I get a sense that that's what they're trying to refer to here when I read that originally. So the last little bit of the introduction I'll read is the conclusion, basically. This collection showcases stunningly Kechi Nomu's aptitude for cacophony, her ability to build and populate a brilliant, bustling world. Nomu is a tender, vivid storyteller with the gift for imbuing and compelling voice and psyche to each character she writes, however briefly rendered. Here is a voice, to use her own words, from Postscript for Four Boys Are Murdered One Morning in Alu, exactly the shape of throats, exactly memory. This collection is alive with the stories she carries, and she immortalizes these with poems. So we get a sense that we're dealing with a storyteller here, which I'm always partial to storytelling. So the second poem I thought I just kind of go through was the aforementioned Three Women. I thought this was a remarkable bit of poetry and poetry writing. So there's three women, obviously. So I'm gonna kind of break it down in this. They're in stanzas here, so each stanza involves one woman. So we'll start with first. These memories are my mother's of her mother, a woman, faceless, body floating in sand and air. Every day she dies in her lover's arms. She who sang the praise songs of dead men, a voice carrying the swell of the years, offering rice, milk, water to wandering men who came to her to drink the dark red wine of sin. I want to say her name long enough to shake her bones, if only I knew where to find them. I want to die in my lover's arms, a woman faceless, body floating in sand and air. My mother, afraid to say her mother's name, makes it the shape of prayers, feeds us God, telling us God will love us more if we are women without hungers, our faces unadorned, no eyeliners for seduction, no red lips, no red for our lips, our bodies holy, virgins waiting for the rapture of men. This memory is mine, of a girl, name unknown. She dies carrying a bomb. Head severed from her body, memory severed. Body floating in sand and air. She only wanted to see God. Afraid to say her name, I make it the shape of a prayer. So besides the wonderful storytelling to really compact 3 distinct stories into one poem, and not a very long poem. I get the reference to the storytelling from the preface. This is storytelling. This is poetry storytelling. This is compact, compelling stories. You get a full vision of who the grandmother was. Although I get the sense with all the men coming in for dark red wine of sin, a little bit promiscuous. The mother, the exact opposite, tries to be very holy. And here I'm going to assume a Christian viewpoint, but it could be Judeo-Christian, Muslim, this idea of sexual purity. And then she witnesses the writer of the poem, and I don't ever equate the writer with the narrator of the poem with the actual writer. So the narrator of the poem narrates her own story of seeing a suicide bomber that blew herself up to be closer to God, to be, thinking that she probably was a virgin with the sexual purity. So that whole, the breakdown of 3 different stories in one, and how they relate, and connecting them with that idea of floating in sand and air, beautiful image. Also, and the way, she's connected each one of these stanzas in different ways. The shape of a prayer, to make this sound of a name in the shape of a prayer. That's poetic expertise. That's deft handling of a poem and the elements of poetry. And again, with the shape, with the boy, with the vertebrae, it's form matching function, which as an avid reader of poetry, I'm always looking for in poetry, that form meeting function. And I think that's just a beautiful example of that. I have a couple other poems here marked. Let's see which one I will do here. There are a number, but that is not an isolated example of what the poetry does. So I have one, My Father Sings. I wanted to just kind of give an idea that it's not all about women. There's from the father's point of view there. But in the interest of time, I definitely wanted to do the title poem. And of course, the title of the chapbook is Acts of Crucifixion. So the title poem, Acts of Crucifixion, I thought I would at least render that one. So Acts of Crucifixion by Kechi Nomu. This is where all poetry begins, on a street where a body has bombed itself in search of God. Like everyone else who sees this, you make a passing inventory, unmarked places, unclaimed body parts. You say you are not afraid of what love has done to you, until names whispered in the streets start to grow inside your skin. Name after name, city after city. Inside you, houses implode, bend like rods failing in concrete, until what is left unmarked is an unlikely memory. Your mother's shoes hanging on a nail on a wall, insensible acts of crucifixion. Besides their worn heels, no stories are left behind for the children. So again, we have reference to that suicide bomber. Of course, something like that, if you ever witnessed something like that, and unfortunately I have, that's the kind of memory that never leaves you. So it kind of spoke to me on a personal note, but that's not generally speaking. But I think anybody that reads that can understand that that's not a memory that one forgets. And then this idea that you're not afraid of love until names whispered in the streets are growing inside your skin. Name after name, city after city. These are, another bombing, another bombing, another bombing, or another senseless act of that kind of thing, of violence of sorts. That things start falling apart, imploding, and reality bends. It bends your mind, it bends your psyche. And then that striking image, what is left unmarked, is the unlikely memory. It's then a startling, unlikely memory, but it often comes out, is this, your mother's shoes hanging on a nail on the wall, in a sensible Acts of Crucifixion. It's probably the only sensible act of crucifixion. Besides the War and Heels, no stories are left for her children. And I think that we all probably have the experience of a vivid image of our mothers or of a significant person in our lives. For me, strangely, it's a mother's dress, a floral print dress of my mother's. It's just one of those things that when I think of my mother, it's one of those images that keeps coming up. And I think we all have one of those images that we can connect to. And they come up at the most unlikely of times, but are always meaningful and always kind of take you away from some of the other troubles or this city after city of violence or life of troubles. There's a single image that can soothe that sort of psyche ache. So that is just a few, I'm just touching on a few things from Acts of Crucifixion that I read this morning. Kechi Nomu. It's a good morning to start reading. Good way to start my day. I look forward to tomorrow's reading. I'll pick up the next chapbook, see what's in the next chapbook. Again, going through the series. I'm going to link Rashmika's channel below because she's far better at this than I am, as you can probably already tell. But please check out her channel. And if you get a chance and you see this hashtag augustinafrica, come back and maybe we'll go through, I will go through all these chapbooks, hopefully. But if you get a chance and want to come back, I would really like to see. And any comments below would be generously welcome. Thank you. BookTube.